It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report 114-290. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report Number 114-290, offered by Mr. Delaney of Maryland.
Pursuant to House Resolution 466, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Delaney, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, recent data suggests that climate change is accelerating, and as a result, the destabilizing effect it has on our environment is worsening. And to my mind, this is a clear threat to American prosperity and global stability. Mr. Chairman, consider the fact that the governor of the Bank of England recently in a speech said that he is very concerned, unless we respond to climate change, that there'll be a dramatic reduction in value of carbon assets, which will cause a financial crisis. As a country with the largest financial markets in the world, we should be concerned about that. Mr. Chairman, consider the fact that Citigroup recently put out a research report that said unless we deal with climate change, the effect on global GDP will be $44 trillion to the negative by 2050. That's twice the size of the U.S. economy. And Mr. Chairman, consider the fact that the UN has estimated that unless we deal with climate change, 150 million people will be forced to be relocated by 2050. 20 million alone in Bangladesh. Put that in the context of the fact that in Syria, we're seeing the effects of 7 million people being forced to be relocated. Again, Mr. Chairman, this is a clear threat to American prosperity, and the bad news is that our environment is worse. The good news is the technology is better for dealing with this problem. Consider the fact that as we have doubled the installed base of solar energy in this country, we have reduced the cost of energy by 23%. It's happened over the last several cycles of doubling solar, and people expect it to continue. This is occurring because of good old-fashioned American innovation. And while I believe there should be policy prescriptions from the government that effectively cost and price carbon, at a minimum, Mr. Chairman, we should agree that by investing in clean energy technology, we will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we will lower energy costs for the American public, and we will increase national security. And that is what the amendment that I have here today is designed to do. And, Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment, but only in order to control some time.
Without objection. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Chairman Upton and I are prepared to accept the gentleman's amendment, but we do have some Republican speakers who would like to speak in favor of it. This time I would yield a minute and a half to Mr. CURBELO from the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico.
State of Florida.
State of Florida.
Gentleman from Florida is
I'm usually good at where people come from. I profusely apologize.
Close enough.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the gentleman for yielding. First, Mr. Chairman, let me offer my support for the underlying bill, H.R. 702. Over the August district work period, I had the opportunity to visit an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico and see firsthand the safety regulations and enhancements that have been put in place by the industry in recent years. Two of the primary topics of discussion during our visit were safety and the environment. Now, I was glad to learn the industry has put a lot of contingencies in place to make sure we can continue drilling for oil in a manner that is safe and responsible. I have joined my colleagues, Mr. Delaney and Mr. Gibson, in offering this simple amendment that would recognize our country is making progress in becoming more energy efficient, and that's better for the economy and the environment. It is also very important to note the other forms of energy that are benefiting our country's economy and its national security. Wind, solar, natural gas, and nuclear energy are all contributing greatly to our energy independence, and this amendment before us today acknowledges that we should continue to promote an all-of-the-above energy strategy for this 21st century. With that, Mr. Chairman, I urge the adoption of this amendment, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman Gentleman from Maryland.
I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York 19 from the great city of Tenderhook. 1 minute.
Gentleman
A minute
from,
and a half.
Gentleman
Mr.
from,
Gibson.
gentleman from New York is recognized for a minute and a half.
Well, I thank the chairman for yielding and for his leadership. And Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment. I'm honored to be working with my colleagues, John Delaney, Carlos CURBELO, to offer this important bipartisan amendment. This amendment adds another strategic dimension to this bill: support for clean energy and energy efficiencies. On our way to energy independence, it's critical that we support research and development for clean energy technologies. In New York, we're doing a lot of this work supporting important programs like the Sunshot program, with the ambitious goal of driving down the total cost of photovoltaics to 9 cents per kilowatt hour, which would allow it to compete with any other energy source and democratize energy, transforming the way we produce, convey, and consume energy. With improved technologies, we will also see more proliferation of wind power, hydroelectric power, and biomass energy, complementing all other traditional energy sources, including crude oil, adding up to a stronger America. Mr. Speaker, this is a country that can do hard things. We have proven that time and again. With the proper focus and investment, we will dominate the clean energy world market, and when we do, we will drive down energy costs, we will grow our economy, strengthen our national security, and conserve our environment. I urge support of this amendment. Let's take a robust and holistic approach to energy independence, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleague and my friend from Texas for accepting this amendment. I want to thank my colleague from New York and my colleague from Florida for their support of their amendment and their insight into this issue. And again, I urge all my colleagues to support the amendment. It's very simple. It simply says that investing in basic research, investing in American innovation, will in fact reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which it's been proven to do, will in fact lower energy costs, which it's been proven to do, and will in fact increase national security in this great country. So again, I want to thank my colleagues for their support, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
We accept the amendment. We'd ask for a voice vote, and we yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Maryland. Those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.